All eyes are going to be on Bilal Muhammad versus JDM. And just looking at the card for UFC 315, it is very lackluster, but the main event is very important. Not because I think the fight is going to be fireworks, but future fights depend on the result of that main event. So I'm going to rank the possible scenarios that could come out of this weekend from my least favorite to my most favorite. The absolute worst scenario would be Bilal winning, but Islam moving up anyway, so Bilal chooses to vacate and go up to 185. This would leave two vacant titles, and I have zero interest in Bilal at 185 at the moment. Everybody's full focus is on Dricus versus Hamza, and after that there are contenders that I would like to see fight for the title, like Amavov and Kyle. Bilal beating JDM and then vacating for Islam to move up would probably result in Islam fighting either Sean Brady or Shavkat for the title. The fact that it would be for the vacant title would take away a lot of the hype. Islam Makhachev does deserve to move up if he desires. I'm not disputing that. He's defended the lightweight title enough to justify moving up a weight class. But when all of the exciting fights are at lightweight, then the hype behind a welterweight move is lowered. It would just create a mess because Islam wouldn't be fighting somebody that beat Bilal or Bilal himself. The second worst scenario coming out of this weekend would be if JDM won. And that's not because I don't want JDM to win, but because this would mean that Islam moves up to 170. Now, this is still a lot better than the previous situation, just for the sole reason that Islam would be fighting somebody who currently holds the welterweight title. I do think that there are interesting matchups for him at welterweight, but not a single one of those fights interests me more than Islam versus Topuria, if I'm being honest. Makhachev versus JDM, and if he were to win, him fighting guys like Shavkat, Bilal, Buckley, or Ian Gary are all very interesting fights, and I do think that those would be tough fights for Islam. I don't think it's as simple as Islam just runs through everybody at welterweight, although he would most likely be favored against whoever he fights. Beating those guys isn't going to be a walk in the park. But I still don't want to see any of those before I see him fight Topuria. So this scenario that would result in my opinion, the two best pound for pound fighters not fighting would be my second least favorite. The best scenario in my opinion would be if Bilal Muhammad wins and Islam decides to stay at lightweight and defend his title. Bilal Muhammad still has fights in the welterweight division that I'm excited to see. For starters, the fight between Usman and Buckley could be a potential number one contenders match, and both fighters have started to build up hype to fight for a title. Usman and Bilal have been going back and forth for a while now. I'm sure you will see more interactions between them. We might even get the footage from the podcast that Bilal is telling Usman and Henry Cejudo to release. If Usman were to beat Buckley, then Usman versus Bilal would have hype behind it. If Buckley were to win, that would still be exciting, as Buckley is one of the most exciting fighters in the UFC. If your problem with Bilal is that he's boring, I believe that Buckley could bring the best out of him. I don't think even Bilal could make a fight with Buckley boring. There's also Ian Gary out there who will build up the fight. As a matter of fact, he's doing it right now. A matchup between Sean Brady and Bilal is probably the least exciting for me, just because even though Brady is probably a better fighter than the last time they fought, I still have the memory of him losing to Bilal fresh in my mind. So that wouldn't be the fight that I would want to see right now. Maybe the UFC could schedule Brady versus Shavkat for the number one contender. Now, as far as Islam goes, I guess this means that we would finally get Islam versus Topuria, which is what I want to see. I believe it was Arman Sarukian who said that if Bilal wins, then the UFC will make Islam versus Topuria, and if JDM wins, then Islam is moving up, and the UFC will make Ilia versus Charles Oliveira for the vacant title. I just want to see the Islam versus Ilia fight. And then regardless of the outcome, Islam can move up to welterweight. The UFC needs a spark, and the lightweight division is going to have to be the division that provides that spark. The number 1 and number 2 pound for pound fighters, in my opinion, facing off is as good as it gets. Who knows if we're even going to get Jones versus Aspinall. However, Dricus versus Hamza does look like it's going to happen soon, but there is this feeling that the UFC isn't making the big fights happen lately. Make this fight happen. I mean, just comparing it to boxing, it feels like they are making the big fights happen. Now, although some of the fights haven't been great, like the one they did in Times Square, the fights were bad, but at least they're making them happen. And that was Dana's criticism of boxing this whole time and why the UFC is better. His whole point was that in the UFC, the best fight the best. And in boxing, everybody's cherry picking their opponent, and the fights that the fans want to see don't get made. Well, if Dana White cares about the sport and his whole focus isn't on boxing and promoting Canelo versus Crawford, then make the fight that the fans want to see. Just look at the excitement for UFC 315. I feel like there is zero hype behind it. All people are discussing is what I'm discussing. What's next for Islam and Ilia? 2025 has not been a good year for the UFC. It feels like complaints from the fans is at an all-time high, and I think it's justified. Some of these main events and even main cards just look awful. The Strickland vs. Duplessis card was bad, and so is this week's card. Make the big fight happen and save the year. And as far as the fans saying that Ilia doesn't deserve this fight and he has to prove himself, is this not the fight that you would be the most excited for? Do you not want that feeling of having an exciting build-up? I know Ilia will absolutely sell that fight. He probably doesn't even need to talk to sell this fight, but I know he will. He'll probably drag Khabib into it, and whatever your opinions on him are, you are going to be captivated. Also, another criticism of this fight is that Islam won't get the full credit, as fans will say that Islam only fights featherweights, and while fans will do that, those fans will do that to anybody Islam fights. If they hate him to begin with, if your whole argument is that people who hate Makhachev will criticize him for fighting Topuria and won't give him credit, then what makes you think that those same fans will give him credit for fighting and beating Justin Gaethje? They won't give him credit for that either. So let's not focus on what those people on the internet are going to say, and let's just enjoy the super fight. Those type of fans will always exist. Every fighter's legacy can and will be criticized. Whether that be he only fought fighters in a lower weight class, whether that be he fought his opponent on short notice, whether that be that the people he fought just aren't good to begin with. Every fighter's legacy can and will be criticized. Whether that be that he only fought fighters in a lower weight class, whether that be he only fought his opponents on short notice, whether that be the people he fought just aren't good enough to begin with. People already do that with fighters who fought a couple years ago. So this whole point that people on the internet, what will people on the internet think about my legacy, shouldn't even matter. You could fight anybody, but once you retire and the next big thing enters the UFC and starts winning, then you'll be forgotten no matter what happens. Islam fighting Topuria and Bilal fighting the winner of Usman versus Buckley would be my best possible scenario, so I'm probably going to be cheering for Bilal this weekend. Let me know who you think is going to win and which one of these scenarios would you prefer. Until next time, peace.